Welcome to Train the Dragon. Today we're going to talk about the Dragon Codex. The Couples Dragon Codex is a covenant workbook for healing, truth, and reconciliation through Jesus Christ. So, in a place where men and women choose truth over hiding, connection over isolation, discipline over impulse, and Jesus Christ over smoke, dragon lies. That's why we're here. This is not merely a series about stopping destructive behavior. This is a journey of transformation where a place where wounded hearts learn how to become safe again. That's what we want. And where couples stop fighting shadows and mirrors and begin understanding dragons. Where homes become places of peace instead of fear. The purpose of the gospel, as Dallin H. Oak says, is to transform us. Sue Johnson says we are wired for connection. John Deloney states that secrets make you sick. The purpose of this codex is not perfection, it's honest, covenant healing. Here's a cool story. The Hall of Two Flames. After many battles against the smoke dragon, Arendor believed the greatest danger lived outside of the kingdom. But one winter night, the king summoned him and Alaneath to a hidden chamber beneath the mountain cathedrals of Eldaroth. The chamber was called the Hall of Two Flames. At the center stood two braziers. One flame burned gold, the other burned blue. The king spoke softly. No covenant survives by warmth from one flame alone. Then the king touched the stone floor with his staff, and visions appeared around them. Hidden resentment, unspoken grief, shame buried beneath silence, fear disguised as anger, loneliness disguised as control, lust disguising sorrow, withdrawal disguising helplessness. Arendor saw moments where he hid in a smoke instead of truth. Alaneath saw moments where her fear hardened into distance. Then the king said something neither expected. The smoke dragon does not merely attack individuals. It feeds upon confusion between hearts. The chamber trembled, and from the shadows emerged an ancient dragon, made not of fire, but fractured words. Its scales were formed from defensiveness, assumptions, secrecy, fear, emotional flooding, silence, comparisons, and unresolved grief. The dragon hissed, "You are enemies." But the king lifted his hand and spoke, "No. They're wounded travelers, learning how to return home." Then before Arendor and Alaneath appeared an ancient book bound in silver chains. The title upon it read, "The Couples Dragon Codex," a guide not for destroying each other, but for training the dragons within together. The purpose of the Couples Dragon Codex is this. This codex exists to help couples rebuild trust, create emotional safety, heal attachment wounds, develop honest communication, separate feelings from destructive reactions, regulate the nervous system, grieve losses together, rebuild covenant intimacy, create peace within the home through Jesus Christ. This is not about winning arguments. It is about becoming people capable of connection. The knight's questions. Questions for the husbands. These questions are not meant for shame. They're meant for truth. Here's the identity question. Who do I become when fear enters a relationship? What dragon do I awaken when I feel rejected? Am I seeking connection or relief from anxiety? What am I asking my wife to carry emotionally that belongs to me and Christ? The smoke dragon's questions. Where do I still hide? What emotions usually precede temptations? When do I seek escape instead of honesty? What false gods am I still worshiping? Like approval, validation, beauty, lust, comfort, power, control, are all things that we might worship instead of God. Here's the next relationship questions. Does my wife feel emotionally safe with me? Can I stay calm under correction? Do I listen to understand? Or defend to survive? Am I building trust through consistency or trying to just rush reassurance? Action principles for the husband as we get doing some good work. Practice nervous system regulation before difficult conversations. Replace urgency with steady presence. Remove secrecy completely. Develop accountability and brotherhood. Lead spiritually without controlling. Stay emotionally honest without emotional flooding. Practice weekly check-ins. Learn reflective listening and become predictable, not performative. Here we get to the Queen's questions. Questions for the wife. These questions are not designed to force forgiveness. They're designed to honor truth while allowing healing. Here's her identity questions. What fears awakened inside me after betrayal or disconnection? Have I begun believing the smoke dragon's lies about my worth? What walls protect me right now? What does safety feel like in my body and spirit? Here are the smoke dragon questions. Have I confused protection with permanent emotional shutdown? Where has resentment replaced honest grief? What fears am I carrying alone? What stories has my pain created about myself, God, or marriage? Relationship questions. What helps me feel emotionally safe? What responses increase fear? What responses create calm? What would rebuilding trust actually look like for me? Now we get to the action principles for the wife. Speak fears honestly instead of indirectly. No passive, aggressive type of responses. Honesty. Allow boundaries without shame. This is how I prefer this. This is what I need. Practice emotionally honest without emotional destruction. I feel this. Separate current reality from catastrophic assumptions. Invite clarity instead of mind reading. Stay connected to safe community and spiritual grounding. Allow healing to happen gradually. Now that we get to the couples together, the king and the queen. These are questions you do together. These questions should be approached slowly, prayerfully, and calmly. Here's a trust and safety section. What helps each of us feel emotionally safe? What destroys safety quickly? What does trust rebuilding actually look like? What behaviors create peace inside the home? Here's the emotional connection questions. When do we feel closest? When do we feel most disconnected? How do we usually react under fear? What emotions are honest for us to express calmly? Dragon pattern questions. What dragon appears most often in the marriage? Avoidance, shame, defensive, anxiety, resentment, lust, control, silence, emotional flooding. That's another one. What usually triggers it? What does healing look like instead? Spiritual questions. How has suffering changed our relationship with Christ? What kind of home are we trying to build together? What covenant principles matter most to us? How can prayer become connection instead of pressure? Family vision questions. What do we want our children to feel in this home? What generational wounds stop with us? What patterns do we refuse to pass down? Here's a section on couples dragon practices. It's a weekly dragon check-in. Every week, we would ask each other, what went well emotionally? Where did we disconnect? What triggered fear? What repair attempts helped? What do we each need this week? Another one I like to add is, generally, are we progressing towards reconciliation or not? Are we progressing towards more connection or not, or neutral? Are we each starting to feel emotionally safer? More or less, or neutral? Is there something that needs to be stopped to keep us on track? Now, regulation before resolutions are very important. And it's very important that you do this before any kind of tough situation. So first, practice this technique. Pause. Breathe slowly. Lower your tone. Regulate your body first, because you cannot heal connection from a dysregulated nervous system. And then when you are talking, it's recommended to use reflective listening. Instead of reacting, you would say, what I hear you saying is, this slows dragons, this builds safety. I heard this. I understand this. That's your goal. Prayer together is very helpful because you're in this together, you're praying together, and God is with you always. Now, it doesn't have to be long speeches. Memorize scriptures, memorize prayers. The goal is to say stuff that's meaningful for you both. Provide gratitude, humility, guidance, and peace. Remember, all knowledge comes from God, and we see things so limitedly. All we want to do is see it through His reflection, not anyone else's, not even our spouses. Next, I want you to name the dragon when triggered. Name the pattern calmly. So this is the fear dragon, is one example. This is the shame dragon, or the urgency dragon. I'm urgency, anxious. This is the silent dragon. Name the dragon helps stop becoming the dragon. For example, in emotional focused therapy, it's important to name the cycle, not the individual. If you're going through a shame cycle where you made a mistake, you take internally and everything's about you. That's the shame cycle. Or you hurt your spouse and they cut off emotionally. That's the silent cycle. Make sense? Now, how does all this help us transform us? The gospel of Jesus Christ. Everything. The gospel transforms couples by teaching them repentance instead of hiding, humility instead of pride, truth instead of illusion, covenant instead of convenience, grace instead of perfectionism, connection instead of isolation. Christ does not merely remove dragons or train them. He teaches husbands and wives how to become people of peace while dragons still exist. Healing home is not a home without struggles. It is a home where truth can survive struggles, where repair becomes possible, where safety slowly returns, where children witnessed humility instead of emotional warfare, where Christ becomes a center instead of fear. What you'll notice through your struggles is that you never were alone, and that your God has been through everything. When you think you're in the middle of a dark, lonely tunnel, He's right next to you. Say with me softly, we are not enemies. We are wounded travelers learning truth, safety, and covenant love through Jesus Christ. Remember, we were both meant not to kill the dragon, only train it through Jesus Christ.